Okay, it's 7 o'clock, so I'm going to get started, and I just started the recording. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's webinar, taking it outside, a panel discussion. We're going to be joined by 4 amazing educators today who will share a little bit about their experiences taking their students outside. My name is Stephanie. I am happy to be leading my first webinar for the K-12 education team. And like I mentioned a little bit earlier, the webinar is being recorded, so don't worry about taking notes throughout. I mean, you can if you want to, but after the webinar, we will be sending out an email to those who registered with the links and a link to our YouTube recording. So anyone who isn't registered can also view the recording on YouTube after this. Hopefully, but in less than a week, it should all be up and running. Now, we're probably all familiar with Zoom by now, but just in case, we're just going to run over a few little details that might help you. So when I shared my screen, it probably went like full screen for you. I'm going to recommend that you exit full screen, and you can find the options button up at the top of your screen, and you can just press the button that says exit full screen, or you can also press escape, and that will exit the full screen mode as well. And the reason I asked you to do this is so that you can dock the chat window in on the side of the Zoom screen, and you can see that little speech button on the bottom, and that has the icon. You can just click on that, and then over on the right side of the screen, where you text, make sure that where it says to, instead of saying only panelists or hosts, just put everyone, so that everyone can see each other's messages throughout the panel. And also, if you want to ask something anonymously, you can just send it directly to me or to Susan, and we can ask the panelists at the end. So let's see. Now, how about we practice our chat window skills? So if you want to, please go ahead and in the chat, let us know where you are from and what is your role as an educator. And I'll give you a minute or two. Okay, Massachusetts, Washington. Oh, just like Phil, Walla Walla. We got teachers from all different grades. Oh, is that from the Philippines? John Javier. Detroit. Texas. California. Everywhere. That's great. Oh, Canada too. We got people from all over. This is great. And if you're just joining, please share in the chat where you're from and your role as an educator. And I will keep going here, but you can all chat. So, as I mentioned earlier, my name is Stephanie Somerville Zamora. I'm the program assistant for the K-12 education team, and I'm joined tonight by Susan Licker. And we work at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, where the mission is to interpret and conserve the Earth's biological diversity through research, education, and citizen science focused on birds. I would like to let you know that we are moving from the term citizen science to participatory science. Oh, we have someone from Belize as well. Welcome. So, this is a slide with our pictures. Susan is our K-12 learning coordinator, and I'm the program assistant. And our mission in the K-12 education team is to create innovative resources and deliver transformative trainings that will empower educators to build young people's science skills through nature, participatory science, and inquiry. Now, all of our resources and trainings focus on these three pillars, which are nature connection, participatory science, and inquiry. Now you can look at them in a number of different ways, but a lot of the educators come to us are interested in taking their students outside, right? And why not combine that with authentic science exploration? You can also view it as a pathway to get inspired, to get outside and explore nature. And once you're out there, I'm sure as you've had happened with your students, a lot of curious questions will arise, and you can, that's where inquiry comes in, right? You can grab those curious questions and create, turn them into investigations. So these are our three main pillars, and we achieve our mission in two different ways, with our curriculum resources and our educators training. So we have curriculum resources that are like more basic, like scavenger hunts and bird bingo, to full curriculum units like our eBird Explorers curriculum. And we are now coming up with a new one, hopefully next year, called Students as Scientists. So I hope you will come back to our website and get to explore those new resources as well. And our educator trainings, we offer those both online and in person. So you can check out our website and learn more, and you can even request a training for your team or district. Now, today, for this webinar, we're going to focus on the experiences that these four panelists have on strategies that they use to engage their students outside. And we're going to learn from them how they foster a safe and effective outdoor learning environment. And you'll have a chance to ask questions. We'll save those for the end. So if you have a question throughout, just put it in the chat or in the Q&A section, and Susan will be monitoring the chat and will lead the Q&A at the very end. So I'd like to introduce our panelists. We have four panelists from all over the country. We have Phil from Washington. We have Sarah in California, Marissa from Ohio, and Aaron from upstate New York. So I would like to introduce Sarah to start us up. We're going to start with the ones that teach the lower grades and then move up all the way up to high school. So Sarah, if you just want to unmute, and thank you for having your camera on. I will turn mine off and I'll let you go here.
All right. Hello, everyone. I am really excited and honored to be here tonight, and I am just feeling very humbled to be here, and I'm really excited to learn from the other panelists as well. So tonight I want to talk briefly about one project featuring outdoor learning with third graders. And then I'd like to discuss some strategies for taking kids outside that worked for me as a classroom teacher, as I learned more how to incorporate that into my practice. All right, next slide. So the third grade project, which we titled Birds Count, has several components, and that includes creating a field guide with original art. The kids did research on local birds. We did a mathematical exploration of the data we collected, and we also had a service learning component. For today, I'm just going to focus here on the component that took us outdoors, which was the bird count. All right, next slide. So last year and over many years, we went to the Berkeley Marina to count birds. The Berkeley Marina is a local outdoor public park, and we went there 3 times over the course of 6 months. Each year we would kick off this unit of study by taking a trip to the Nature Center and participating in a formal field trip there, where the Berkeley Marina staff, and including the director and local volunteers, would teach the kids about local birds and birds in general. And we would do our first bird walk and first count with those folks. And then we would return to the Berkeley Nature Center again on our own, and we would do more of a practice count, where I would help students learn how to tally on their clipboards the birds they were identifying, and we would get a chance to practice in the moment identification and counting of birds. And then the third trip, following this gradual release of responsibility model, the kids were handed the responsibility for the counting of the birds, and I would not have my clipboard and was more of a facilitator while the kids identified and counted the birds. And so at the end of their count, the kids were very excited to enter the data and submit it to eBird, thus becoming official participatory scientists, a term I just learned tonight. So I'm excited about that. All right, next slide. So that was the structure of our project. And now I'd like to share some strategies that really helped me, particularly at the beginning of taking kids outside, for helping them feel safe and for helping me teach effectively outside. So I put this in 3 different buckets. The first bucket is to know your students. The second one is to know the place. And the third one is to know that you are not alone. All right, next slide. So the first know about knowing your students is that knowing your students will not all have the same relationship with the outdoors and will have a variety of experiences and relationships with outdoors. And knowing that not all students experience the outdoors as a safe place. So when I met my students at the beginning of the year, I would ask them questions to get to know how often and in what contexts they went outdoors. And that would help me adapt. I also learned from an incredible local organization called Vida Verde that it was helpful to start kids standing on the ground outdoors versus asking them to sit on the ground. Because the ground does not look the same in all neighborhoods and for all kids, and not all cultures encourage sitting on the ground. So that was one way in which I helped create a sense of emotional safety for my kids when starting out outdoors. All right, next slide. The second know when starting to take kids outdoors is to know the place you're going to. So if you can scout it ahead of time, fantastic. If you can go multiple times, even better. I had the advantage of taking kids to the same field site over the past 5 years, which provided some awesome longitudinal bird count data, but also it helped me know what to expect. And one of the things I learned at the marina, it is very frequently windy and my voice does not carry very well. Therefore, before we headed out for our bird counts, I taught and practiced with the kids a call and response attention getter that the kids would echo to help amplify my voice and amplify the message of it's time to gather into our circle. And once we were standing in our toe-to-toe circle, I would always try to establish the boundaries of where kids could go and could not go, depending on whether we were on a field, walking on a trail, where the roads were, etc. And on this map, you can see that during the bird count, I planned rest breaks where there were bathrooms and fields for the kids to play on to get a little brain break in the middle of all this very focused counting. And next slide. Thanks, Susan. And finally, my third bucket is just to know you are not alone. I think one of the great myths of education is of the super teacher doing it all by themselves. And although I'm sure you are all super teachers, no one, in fact, does it alone. So in addition to the great national organizations like the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, there are many local organizations and local experts that can help you facilitate kids' experiences outside and teach you something about taking kids outside. So as I said, we would start our bird program each year at the Nature Center. And after repeating this for really only 1 year, the director already knew me and he would always reach out, come out and check in on us and say, oh, have you seen that kite nest over there? Or how's it going today? And so we developed this partnership that has just been pretty incredible for myself as well as for the kids. So I really encourage you to find local mentors and organizations that will partner with you. All right. That's it from me. Thank you for listening. And I'm excited to learn from Marissa, who I got to meet in St. Louis at a Cornell Lab event. So off to you, Marissa.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, it was so fun to be connected because I remember at St. Louis learning from Sarah there, and then to see her here again is wonderful. So, my name is Marissa Selzler. I'm an elementary media specialist in Ohio. So, media specialist is a librarian, is the role in a school, and my work consists of um, teaching students literacy, research, coding, technology, all those concepts with and through nature. So next slide, please. So I have something at school called the Outdoor Learning Lab. My school's name is Chapman Elementary, and this is a picture of us in action in the lab. Next slide. And one of the things that I think is the biggest help and makes such a difference when you're getting started is this simple Venn diagram that it's just developing this outdoor learning mindset. So what I do with all my classes is I see the whole school every week. So I see library as a class. So that's the beautiful thing, is that I get to see everyone. And so the first conversation we have before we go outside is about this outdoor learning mindset. And so we talk about an outdoor learning lab brain versus a recess brain. And the reason why we do that is so that we can really think about what it looks like, sounds like, feels like to be in these spaces. And we have a conversation about, like, why are we having this conversation? And a big piece of it is around safety, that we talk about, okay, what is the purpose for when we're outside at recess? What's the purpose we're in the lab? And when you're at recess, you're moving your body, you're getting out your energy, you're playing, and all those things are great. In the lab, we're more focused and we have a purpose of why we're out there. We can still enjoy being outside, which is that middle piece, but it feels different than recess. And a big piece of it is around safety, because whenever we're outside and we have different tools that we're using, then we don't want to be running with them, because if they would fall, then they would get hurt if they're running with a clipboard and pencil and things like that. So it's saying, okay, recess, great time to run. In the lab, not a great time to run. And then also just talking about, in the lab, we can be talking, but we want to make sure that we're not out there yelling, because there's classrooms around us that we don't want to be interrupting their learning. And so what's really been amazing is, from this conversation and from practicing this with students, we're at a point now where we can go outside. I can go outside with a class even when recess is going on, and the students in class can have a lab brain while there's students having recess and have recess brain. So those two can exist at the same time, that it's like, okay, we're all out here coexisting in this space, but our purpose is different. So they've really done an amazing job. And this has just been such a great visual tool, and helps to build the why of, like, why are these behaviors what we do outside? Why why is this the expectation? And it helps around safety, of, like, we want to be safe. So this has been huge. So I highly recommend using this or some kind of visual. Next slide, please. Whenever we are outside, then they have nature journals. And so what's really cool is they have complete ownership over these journals, that these journals are made from recycled materials. The students make these. They make every part of it. They put all the pages in, they sew it up, they design the cover, they bring in the stuff that we use. And what they do with their journals is they record their observations in there, and it helps them to reflect on their learning over time. So I think that there's a lot of power in that it's not just about what standard we're covering, that they can look back and see how their observations have changed, how they've thought about things differently. It's really cool to have this record of your thinking over time. Next slide, please. And outdoor learning is for everyone. A perfect segue with the journal is that we have a student at our school that's visually impaired. So his journal is in Braille. His observations are recorded and then brailled, and then tactile pieces are put in his journal. But just any consideration, just like Sarah was saying, about people have different comfort levels outside. So it can be something like, even if kids have fears about things, just knowing your audience and knowing how you can help everyone feel comfortable and have a positive experience outside. Next slide, please. And outdoor learning is just so engaging and so fun. One of the things that was important to me whenever I was developing the program at my school is that I wanted kids to have real tools that they're using out there, like feel like they're real scientists, like real tools that they're using, and that I trust them to use them, because we talk about this is what a lab brain looks like. And then when they're outside, they know what to do. They know what's expected. So we have binoculars, we have these awesome bubble umbrellas, because when it's raining outside, a lot of times everybody goes inside, but that's when really cool things are happening outside. So a lot of kids haven't seen things like, they had a lot of wonders about what happens when it's raining because they miss it all the time. They're inside. So it's been really cool to like help them to see the outdoors in a different light. And one more slide, Steph. And then just my last and really important point is just that outdoor learning is so joyful. It's I just love this picture. This is from just a few days ago when we were doing leaf rubbings, and I've been trying to document our journey over time so that they can see it too in pictures. And I just love that this little boy just like looked up at the perfect time. But I just think that the joy, sharing in that joy of outdoor learning is so important, because it's not only about that moment, but it's that experience that they're going to carry with them forever. So you're fostering and building this love of the outdoors and the wonder and the joy, and just really starting that at a young age. And just as Sarah said in hers too, that people are coming from different experiences, where some kids have a lot of experience outside, where some kids, are new to the outdoors, and you're opening this up to them. All right, Steph, that's my last slide. I think I'm passing it off to Phil.
No, I think it's Erin, but thank you, Marissa.
Erin.
Thank you, Sarah. We both gave us a lot to think about. I see there's questions coming in, but we'll still save them for the end. Just put them in the chat, please. And yes, next up is Erin. Let me move to the next slide and spotlight you.
Hi, everybody. I am Erin Wiley from upstate New York. And when I say upstate New York, I'm talking the tundra. I live on the Tug Hill Plateau. And I teach exclusively now, I teach high school and college classes. I spent 17 years in the middle school, and then got moved up over the last 2 years up to high school. So these are two pictures that I took this summer up in Hog Island, Maine with the Audubon Society. I was gifted a trip to the educator camp up at, like I said, Hog Island, Maine, in Bremen, Maine, and got to see puffins for the first time. I got to see a parula bird. So before I go on to the next slide, I will say what has made me a better outside educator is going away every summer, or as much as I can, and doing these kind of trips to add to my toolbox, because I learned a lot in these, and I've been able to bring it back to my classroom. Like, for example, these photographs, I took them with my phone. So I learned how to do that a couple of years ago, and now I teach that to my kids. So next slide. So I started this with Operation Bird Blindness. I went to Cornell Bird Camp, I called it. And I had no idea. This was like 5 years ago, and I was completely bird blind, and it was a wake up call. So I started very simple. And with that means I just went outside. I started taking kids out as much as I could, because I recognized as a 35-year-old woman, I was completely bird blind. So I needed my kids to be more aware of their surroundings. So we just went outside and looked at things in our, basically on the football field. Okay, next one. And then I asked for help. I had 2 pairs of binoculars, one pair that I got when I went to, what, like I said, bird camp, and then another pair from my great grandfather. And I started to just ask for help. I'm not allowed to do donors choose with my school. So I just put a request out there, and then I went to every garage sale I could find. So I usually use just these really quick bird field guides. And then I've acquired 20 pairs of binoculars. I have more, but 20 like workable pairs that people have just donated to me just from me asking. And then step 3 is just to make it fun. I make a competition all the time because I teach, well, now high school, even at middle school, kids love games. So I turn everything into a game. So we would have bird counts on the way to school. They'd have to look out their window. We have a ton of eagles around here, and they'd have to prove it with pictures on their phone. So I turned everything into a game, and those at the end of the week who could identify the most birds and show me the pictures and just basically show me they went outside, I gave really silly prizes to. Like I bought a bunch of bird journals from Amazon, and they love them. So make it fun. Okay, next slide. So middle school, I focused more on, this was the bird journals that I bought. And I used these, and these were my rewards. And this is what I used with the kids because it was simple. And middle school, that's my goal, was just to get them seeing it, identifying it, using field guides like this, and knowing what was out there. I showed them that my bird journal is actually, I write in this is my bird field guide, and I write in here the date and time when I first see the bird. So a lot of kids like this better than actually writing in the journal because this has all the information right there. I'm sorry, my dog is having a meltdown over there. Sorry about that. And then now I teach high school. I focus more on migration. So I live by Derby Hill. Sorry, my dog. In Oswego, New York. And it's a huge migration point. It's only about 40 minutes from my school. So we have focused on just why the birds are migrating, when they're migrating, when's a good time to go see it. Jobs, observing the birds, because there are jobs right at Derby Hill, counting the birds. And really, I show a lot of migration patterns and how you can see it on satellite images. 2 completely different beasts. Middle school, just identifying birds. High school, why birds do what they do. Kind of more of an interaction with the birds. Right, next slide. Did I freeze? We go to the next slide. There we go. So this is something easy you can do. I use the Cornell bird cams in my classroom, and I have them always up on my board. If I'm not using my board, I have a clear touch board, and we watch the red-tailed hawks all spring. And we also watch the barred owls whose eggs did not hatch. So I do a lot, like I said, I teach college, so I don't really lecture or anything like that anymore. So the kids will have that as the backdrop in my room, and they are constantly looking up. And I've learned a lot about birds just from listening to my kids that they've learned from, growing up here in the North Country. And so we use the bird cams a lot. They're free. And a lot of my coworkers have actually started to do it because the kids talk about it all the time. And then I bought a bird feeder, and the school wouldn't let me put it up at school. We had some issues with that. So I put it up in my house, which actually has better birds. And I am constantly streaming that into my classroom, and the kids are getting really good at identifying that. That was, I think, I bought it on an Amazon Prime Day. I think I paid $75 for it. Use it every day. So next slide. Okay, so I also like to teach non-traditional learning styles. So my goal is to make everybody comfortable. And at the high school level, sometimes kids really can't write. They made it that far, and their writing is just, it doesn't show what they know. So this is an example of a project I made with Keystone Crest. I was doing Keystone species, and this is just one on snow geese that a kid chose to do because we actually have a lot of snow geese around here, and they are a keystone species. And so I do a lot of arts and crafts projects with alternatives if kids aren't comfortable with that. But you would be amazed by just asking the kids to go out and draw something, or actually, this is where I would use my photography. My kids take pictures, and I would consider this non-traditional, I suppose. My kids take a lot of pictures, and we display them in my classroom, and it's incredible. how good these kids have gotten at taking photographs of birds. So this past spring, I got scarlet tanager and I got an indigo bunting, and a kid sent me pictures, and they were more excited about that than I think they were about going to prom. So that would be what I considered a non-traditional style. And they were able to present to me what they knew about those birds just by showing me the camera, the picture, and then describing that bird to me. Next slide. Okay, and this is finally it. Just unplug and go outside. I do maple syrup projects. We tap trees, and my kids actually make maple syrup with me. So this is in the wintertime. That's my dog that goes to school with me. We were out tapping trees, and I said, "Oh my gosh, there's a whole flock. Let's go see what it is." It was snow buntings. We went and grabbed the binoculars. We looked at them for a while, and then the picture on the right. One of the other teachers called me on the way to school, and they said, "There's a red-tailed hawk on the top of the school. You got to go check it out." So we all went out first period. This is at 7:40 in the morning, looking at a red-tailed hawk, and the kids were just enthralled by it. And it's interesting too, because while the red-tailed hawk was there, they went up to try to clear some debris because the bird made a mess, and there was a dead bird up there with a band. So then I taught them how to look up banded birds and how to report that. So it became like a teachable moment. I would say just get outside. And I live by the motto of ask forgiveness. I don't ask permission, and I have a lot of fun, and my kids do too. So that's it for me.
Thank you, Erin. Sometimes you do have to ask for permission, but yeah, I like your motto. And up next we have Phil. All
right. Thanks, Erin. So I've got quite a few stories, and I'll try to make them short. I better check the time. So this first slide is a picture that was taken of me in the Peruvian Amazon with some students, where I was befriended by a bird guide there. He said he needed binoculars to teach students. And like me, he liked taking the kids out, teaching them about birds. But the big equalizer in teaching students about birds is you got to give them the tools that they need so that they can see the birds. And these students did not have binoculars. And so when I found that out, I went home and I figured there's got to be some way to get binoculars to Peru. And I got donations, and we somehow pulled it off. And we've got almost 200 pairs of binoculars in the Amazon now being shared by remote schools along the Amazon and Napo rivers. And they're shared among different schools now. And we're still collecting binoculars, and they're still using them. And so the Amazon Binocular Project was born. Next slide. And so when I first started teaching, I wanted to take my kids outside. And of course, field trips at a drop of a hat can be difficult to set up. And so we had some property behind the school, and I thought, well, let's do something on the property behind the school. And I somehow talked my administration, my parents, my students into helping build a bird feeding station complete with a bird blind. And this was just west of Portland, Oregon. And as you can see there, for more than 20 years, we collected data on the birds that came to the bird feeders. And kind of the key curriculum we used as part of that was investigating evidence. And early on, my students noticed that we had a lot of dark-eyed juncos there in the blue line at the beginning. And a couple of years into it, around 1999, 2000, all of a sudden, the population dipped, and we started getting house sparrows, which we had never seen in the previous 3 or 4 years. My students noticed, and a couple of my students wrote research papers about what they observed, and it was published by Cornell Lab of Ornithology in the student journal. But that's all part of the investigating evidence curriculum you can download for free. But long-term projects like this are possible. Setting up bird feeding stations at your school. It doesn't have to be a full-blown bird blind with bird feeders out front. Can just be a window feeder in your classroom or somewhere else around the school. Next slide. And so a couple of years ago, I moved to Walla Walla, Washington, and I'm working at an ALE school, alternative learning environment. Some of you may be familiar with that. And now I'm working strictly with high school students, whereas before I had a mixture of middle school and high school students that used the bird blind. But here, of course, in the middle of the pandemic, everything had migrated to Google Classroom. And so I got together with my principal and we looked at how could we teach ornithology to high school students. And we were able to get binoculars, arrange for field trips. And so I just started putting things in Google Classroom. The photo there is a group of students from one of our first field trips, and you can see the Columbia River there in the background. We had gone up and we were able to get a local birding expert. In fact, I think Mike Denny is I see his name there in the participants. And so he has been our leader on several of our field trips. And we got a new one scheduled coming up next month to Whitman Mission National Historic Site. Next slide. And so to kind of get things organized, we had a grant where I was able to purchase 10 pairs of binoculars. We got Vortex Raptors 8.5 by 32s if you're looking at. But even with the Amazon Binocular Project, we learned early on that you got to get the newer waterproof variety or the kids will destroy them. So they just are more rugged and they hold up. So you definitely want to get waterproof binoculars. And then I was able to get 10 copies of Sibley's Birds West, the field guide. And then I just started out trying to figure out, okay, how can I put my curriculum in a logical order and make it kid friendly, right? And so my first unit was bird watching, and I knew I wanted my kids outdoors. So there's a field lab, and I'll explain all this in more detail here in a minute. But unit 2 was bird diversity. So they're looking at, bird adaptations and different types and species of birds. And then unit 3, the 5 keys to bird identification. And then at that point, the curriculum was going to take too much time. So I made the conservation and bird feeding units optional, hoping that some of my kids would dive in. Then my resources, I get into ornithology careers, and so lots of resources. All of my students use the eBird app and the Merlin apps. Next slide. And so in unit 1, we start off with binoculars and how to use them, since we're providing binoculars, and I want to make sure that they last and they take care of them. All of my students take the eBird Essentials online course. It's free, and high school students get through it just fine, and it works for them. And then the rest of my curriculum, I pull resources from the eBird Explorers series. Both the high school and the middle school editions have different things that I've found very useful. I love the posters with the silhouettes on the flip side, and the Cues to Bird ID poster is just awesome. Both of those kits contain those. And then what do you do if your phone doesn't work? So I also put something there that talks about birding with a notebook or a tally sheet. And then there's a unit 1 bird watching test, which is a multiple choice Google form. Next slide. And so Unit 3 then focuses on 5 keys to bird identification. And as my textbook, I use Birdwatching Basics for Dummies. I received a whole pallet of these books from a former parent who worked at Leupold. So I've got a lifetime supply of these for my students, and I give them away. And the chapters go along perfectly with the way I've set this out. And so chapter 4, identifying birds, if it walks like a duck, and they read the page numbers, and it goes right along with the inside birding size and shape videos. And if you haven't seen the inside birding videos, look them up. They are excellent. And then we look at the size and shape silhouettes. And then, of course, there's color pattern, bird behavior. Bird sounds gets into the I think the Bird Song Hero on the web page there, and then habitat. And so this is all pretty cool stuff. I put together kind of a cheat sheet of 15 common birds that my students should be able to find any time of the year in Walla Walla. And so I give that to the students to get them started. Next slide. Oh, I guess I am done. And so if you've got questions, fire away.
Thank you, Phil.
You're welcome.
So we do have a few questions in the chat. So let me just quickly navigate to that where I'm keeping track of those, but please keep putting those in the chat if you have them. The first one I have is for you, Marissa. Can you suggest some books that you use in your outdoor learning lab? And any other tools besides your journal that you use?
Yeah, so thanks for putting that in the chat, because as you can see from behind me, I love books, and from my title to media specialist. So I actually had one that I could show you right now that I was so excited. I wrote down a little list for you. This one is Hike. There's another one called The Hike. There's one called Beneath, and one called The Camping Trip. And I will put all those in the chat as well, so that you don't have to try to remember them. But what I wanted to show you about The Hike, since I had it, is what's really neat is this is a word list. And this is one that can be used in so many ways, in that you can just pull out a picture and talk about one picture in it. You can use it for writing workshop that you're like, let's make a story about what's happening here. You can use it as a mentor text of making your own, of capturing what they're doing outside and then writing about what they're doing. So I love word list picture books, and there's just so many good ones. There's also a collection that I have on Epic that I'll share. If you don't know about Epic, it's a free resource for teachers, and they have a lot of great nonfiction books and fiction books as well, but that's free for teachers, and it's free for students during the school day. So I have an Epic collection that I use as well, because a big part of my work is coupling that literacy with nature and the outdoors. So we always have some kind of mentor text we're using. So sometimes the mentor text is a book like this. Sometimes the mentor text is the bird ID cards that come with the Cornell Lab. If you've been to one of the retreats, then it has information. It has the picture on one side. It has information about the bird on the other side. Sometimes we use that as a mentor text. And as far as other things for the lab, we have clipboards that kids can use. Pencil size, like big pencils are helpful, so that way, depending on the grip, like sometimes the big pencils work better for some students. Regular size pencils, and then paper choice that they make their own journal, but it's just, okay, some kids like grid paper, some people like blank paper, some people like lines. So I try to give as much choice as possible. And then whenever we're doing something, adding into that. So for example, before we went outside to look for signs of spring last year, I read them this poem about spring. They glued it in their journal and then wrote all these signs of spring around that. So a lot of times I try to just give a little piece and then we build off of it.
Thank you, Marissa. And if you want to share those with us, I'll make sure they get sent out in the email as well, Marissa. Do any of the other panelists have a book or two they want to recommend? Or again, we can send those out via email as well. Okay, another one. What is one thing you wish someone had told you before taking your students outside? Does anybody want to? Sarah, you're laughing. You want to answer that one first, and then we can see if anybody else has anything to add?
Sure. I think this comes from a series of mistakes. So, but the question seems to embed that. I would say always bring an extra water bottle and tell your kids to bring extra snack. They just get hungrier outside, especially if you're spending the whole day outside. And knowing your local hazards. So whether it's poison oak in California or poison ivy, knowing that yellow jackets are more active in the fall, just knowing the contours of some of those local hazards can help prevent bigger problems from developing. So extra water bottle and do a site check if you're going to be outside for a long time.
Yes, great points. Any Phil or Aaron, you want to add anything?
Oh, I totally.
Sorry, go ahead.
I just totally agree with what Sarah said. You've got to know the site, you got to walk it, and you got to be ready for anything. So having extra things, whether it's a water bottle or your first aid kit, your poncho, just whatever. If the kids aren't prepared, and even if they think they're prepared, things go wrong. So being ready is important.
Yeah, I was just going to say, learn to laugh. There's a lot of mistakes. And sometimes I learn a lot from the kids when they point some stuff out that I didn't know. And, I look kind of dumb sometimes, but that's all right. I learn to laugh.
That's great. I love the learn to laugh if we can't laugh at ourselves, but probably all of you as teachers know that already. Like you're probably laughing at yourselves regularly, I would think. How about what is the most challenging part of teaching outside and what's the most rewarding? Phil, you want to start us off?
Well, for me, the most rewarding part is when you see that student click and they're noticing something and they get excited and the light just goes on and the enthusiasm is infectious, and that keeps me going. And I'm just trying to think of, I guess when I first started, I wished I'd started sooner. And my advice is don't wait. Don't be afraid to risk. This kind of education is meant to be an adventure, and the unexpected is supposed to happen, and you're learning with your students every step of the way. And that joy for learning will be infectious to your students too. And so yeah, don't wait. Get started with your outdoor program as soon as you can. I kind of hesitated at first when I first started teaching, and I just I feel like I missed a couple of years that I could have been doing this sooner. So just jump in. Yeah.
Thank you. How about anyone else want to jump in on that one? That question?
Sure. I have chickens at my house. I start off with just bringing some of my chickens into my classroom and getting the kids acquainted with just looking at the birds. They're in my room, just walking around. They don't stay there forever, but for a couple of days they see silky chickens, and then it starts for them to notice things about the birds. And then I have a lot of bird feeders on my windows, and I love that the kids know birds. Like they start to identify them. They're always whipping out these field guides, which are everywhere in my room. I could be teaching about human muscles and tissues, and they're like, ah, there's an oriole, you know. So that I just love listening to kids, and they like to get me off task. It's very easy. With birds, it's so easy because they're right there, you know, but it's teachable moments, and seeing that they're learning too, because a lot of them know this stuff from their families. Like, because I live in the rural area, they know birds better than I do, because these people live by, you know, live outside. They're hunters, they're gatherers. You wouldn't believe where I live. And they know more about eagles than I do. So just learning from kids is important.
Marissa or Sarah, do you have anything you want to add?
I was just gonna say, oh, these are my people, because I feel the same way. There's just so much joy, and you become the bird lady or the bird person or whatever. And there's so much joy in getting to learn alongside them, such that I have to turn off bird mode sometimes when we're concentrating on something else. I'm like, I know, I see it too. We can't talk about it right now. Later. So it's just so fun. I'd say the only challenge is also kids started coming to me when they found a hurt animal, and it was often a bird, but not always. It's a good kind of public awareness point too about and place for kids to learn about, like, well, why do birds get hurt? What is a window strike? What can we do about that? So that is challenging, because you see the pain of it too. But overall, that's part of the reward too, is helping kids know that they can make a difference.
Marissa, you want to add something?
Yeah, I was just going to add on to something that Erin said, which I think is so true. It's so beautiful, is about like the kids being the lead learners, you know, and them. I love that you don't have to know everything, you know, we don't want it that way. It's great that it's a community of learners and kids share what they know. And what was really cool is I had a student who went to Alaska for a trip, and so I mailed her, we were on summer break, and so I mailed her a bird guide for Alaska, because she was like, Mrs. Helsler, I will be looking for the birds. And she came back and brought this whole journal that she created and kept track of, and made like a bird list and all this stuff. And I was like, you know, some of these birds were new to me that I have never seen. And so I just love what Erin was saying about, you know, like harnessing the power of the group and these kids amplifying their voice and using their expertise, because that's what makes it so fun, is that it's you know, it's a whole community of learners.
I love that. And I love how all of you the question was both rewarding and challenging, and for all of you that it's so much more rewarding than any of the challenges you face. And I think that's a huge take home, I guess, that there are going to be these little things, but the joy and the reward, not only for you but for your students as well, is just, it so outweighs whatever challenges might come up. And I think the thing about nature is just the whole idea that really, literally no one in this world can know everything about nature. And so we truly are all lifelong learners, and it is a great modeling tool. So thank you all for that.
Can I add a thought?
Absolutely.
Can I add a thought? As I was listening to you, I was reminiscing some of my times with middle schoolers, and sometimes middle schoolers, it's not cool to admit that you like birds. And some of my middle schoolers went through those phases, and they were just hard nuts to crack. And as a group, they wouldn't admit that they like it, but individually, I would hear stories, you know, that Johnny or Sally went on vacation, and they were pointing out all the birds to their family and parents. And years later, I would have students come up to me, and they still know the names of the birds, and they're still watching them. And so just know that even if your students aren't admitting that they like this, it's getting to them, and you are making a difference.
Yes, that's so true. And I think the other maybe point along with that is that, you know, some of your students might not love birds, but there's going to be something that they like outside. There will be something that they can find interesting. So just, again, that idea of getting them outside. So I think that, oh, we did have one, I saw another question come in asking about just how do you, so this is a homeschool parent who is leading students and they have their whole family outside. Any tips or tricks for keeping kids engaged over a longer period of time that might not just be one class period?
Make it a game. Always make it a game and have stupid prizes. They love it.
Great.
I feel like I have a lot of experience with this with my own kids. I have two girls. They're 4 and 5 years old. And so we do a lot. I think I saw in the thing too, she said about like getting out as a family and for like extended periods of time. And I think that getting out, like it's just been a really great and joyful experience for our family and a learning experience. But like my girls, like the same things that I did for students is like being comfortable outside. So it's like, okay, what gear do we need? Talking about what we're going to need to prepare with and making sure we have the stuff we need and to be comfortable outside, and then being out for like these experiences. So I feel like what's neat is you can take these field trips to places and see what you discover close by your home, or do like a walk in your neighborhood each day and write down observations. And my girls, they all have nature notebooks. And even though my youngest is in preschool, and you know, it's not always even words that are written down or letters, it's things noted down. But I think really giving them those tools, and they really like feel a part of things. It's like feeling a part of this experience. And like my girls both wanted hiking poles because my husband and I both have hiking poles. So it's just, I think that this family experience and getting out together, there's something about it, and just discovering together too, because I love that when you're out as a family that someone might, you never know who's going to notice something, you know, that someone, and then it's like the whole family looks at it, and then it becomes an investigation that we're like, oh, what was this? And we're trying to figure it out, and they see the whole process together.
Great, thank you. And we are at 7:58, so we just have a few minutes left. So I want to give a huge thank you to all of our panelists for joining us tonight. Your expertise is amazing, and we just very much thank you. And I want to make sure everybody saw in the chat, there were lots of thank yous in there for all of you panelists as well. And then we do have another webinar next. We actually are skipping the month of November, and we will have one in December, which is going to be a smorgasbord for educators. So that's really us going to be overviewing many of our different resources, both as the K-12 team and as the some of the lab itself, the larger lab. And we will, Steph, I don't think we got the contact letter put together, did we, for this one?
We did.
No, no big deal. So we
Sorry.
will make sure when we send out the, if you need a contact letter from us, because we don't give them to those people who watch the recording, please just send us an email there at the K-12 lab at cornell.edu, and we will make sure we get it to you. So sorry about that, but we will get it for you. And again, thank you all. It was great to have you as panelists, and thank you all for joining us tonight.